Adventures of the Decepticons Pet Ghost by Played Crowd 5610. Part 3 of Hunting the Nemesis. Chapter 14. Vivisection Bodies. Summary. After being attacked and experimented on by Mech, Breakdown is rushed to the medical bay for his injuries. Then he was kneeling on one of the countertops about 15 feet above the ground, whipping it down with a cloth and a bottle of solvent. He didn't usually clean up the med bay, but he really just wanted something to keep him busy while Knockout was reorganizing his tools again. Knockout let out an exasperated sigh, looking over at the time display on the monitor again. Where is he? He muttered more to himself than Danny. He set down a wrench-looking tool on one of the shelves and glancing over at the human on the counter. Breakdown should have been back by now. It's not typical for him to keep me waiting. His PD tapped on the floor. Danny scrubbed at the stubborn stain on the counter that he likely didn't want to know the origin of. Maybe he's taking the scenery route, he suggested. Knockout let out a huff, crossing his arms. Possibly. Then he could sense tension pooling in the mech's EM field. Knockout really showed concern, openly. But it was easily enough to see if you paid attention. And Danny was good at paying attention. Just as Danny was about to make another sarcastic comment to try and distract Knockout some more, the doors to the medbay hissed open and the atmosphere instantly shifted. Heavy footsteps clanged against the floor as two Decepticons rushed in, dragging Breakdown's limp frame between them. Danny dropped the cloth immediately. His eyes widened at the blue mech's battered body. Parts of his armor were removed entirely. His chest plate was sawed apart, and his right optic was completely missing from the socket, causing Immergon to flow down across his chest plate. Danny's core lunged. The sight was horrific. Breakdown! Knockout's voice broke through the stunned silence, sharp and filled with alarm. He practically shoved the Decepticon out of the way, who barely managed to get Breakdown onto the medical table before stepping back. Knockout didn't even acknowledge them, his optic glued to the mangled mess of his partner's frame. He started frantically trying to scan Breakdown with his internal medical systems. What happened? Knockout demanded, with a mix of panic and fury, as he glanced up at the cons. Who did this to him? The Decepticons exchanged uncomfortable looks, but remained silent, not offering any explanation. They seemed reluctant or maybe afraid to speak. Without a word, they turned and left the room quickly, the door sliding shut behind them, leaving Knockout, Danny, and the severely injured Breakdown alone. Useless pieces of scrap! Knockout spat, but his focus immediately returned to Breakdown. His hands moved frantically over his partner's form, trying to assess the damage. Oh, Primus! Danny stepped closer, his eyes glued to Breakdown, as he asked, What do you need me to do? Knockout didn't even hesitate. Get the Irrigon transfusion equipment now! Knockout was already putting pieces of equipment off of shelves and throwing them onto his workstation. Then he rushed to the nearby storage cabinet, grabbed the necessary equipment with practiced ease in the months he had spent in the med bay. He had dozens of those times before. But this was Breakdown, Knockout's partner. Danny shivered as he felt the barely suppressed panic radiating off the mech as he tried to work. As Danny set up the transfusion, Knockout servers moved across Breakdown's brutal torn chest plate, his optics scanning the damage in detail. There were jagged edges where the metal had been sawed open, Immergon leaking from the exposed internals. Organs and mechanisms damaged or missing. But Knockout met Breakdown's only functioning optic, which flickered. How did this happen? He demanded, his voice laced with disbelief and anger. What in the pit could have done this? Then he got a feeling he would have gestured angrily if he currently wasn't service deep in Breakdown's cases. Breakdown groaned before tilting his helm to the side. Then he sensed a flicker of shame in his field. An organization of humans, mech. Knockout froze, the word humans hanging in the air like a death sentence. His optics flared with rage as he processed the information. Humans? Humans did this to you! His voice rose sharply, anger blaring his field. How? I will tear them apart, I will— Then he quickly stepped in. Knockout, focus. We need him stable first. We can worry about revenge later. Knockout blinked, field stabilizing as he looked down at Breakdown again, and nodded sharply, though the fury in his optics hadn't lessened. You're right. Stabilize him first. Then he stayed by Knockout's side, ready to assist with whatever he needed, his own field flickering with concern. Knockout's service didn't tremble as he scanned over Breakdown's battered form. He was a medic. He was too good for that. But it was a close thing. He was scanning again and again, trying to figure out where to start. His processor was racing, screaming at him to work faster, the panic fueling his circuits. He tried to push it aside, trying to fall into the familiar rhythm of medical procedure as if it was any regular mech on the table. He looked down at Breakdown's face, his partner's optics dim but focused, though something was off. Breakdown's face wasn't grimacing in pain, like he should be in this situation. Knockout frowned. Breakdown, Knockout asked, voice tight with concern. Are you in pain? Knockout's gaze shifted slightly, trying to look down at his injuries, but couldn't see past the chest plate. No, he paused. They shut off my pain receptors. Knockout's spark clenched at the words. The thought of Breakdown being carved open while completely aware, but unable to feel what was happening. Thank the agents for that, Danny chimed in, his field displaying a mixture of relief and horror. Getting ripped apart without the painkillers is way worse. Knockout let out a heavy sigh, forcing himself to focus. I agree. The pain would have been unbearable. His hands moved more methodically now. Once I finish the surgery, I will fix your pain receivers, he promised. He scanned Breakdown's optic socket to assess the damage. The American flow needed to be stopped immediately. Knockout grabbed the soldering tool Danny had retrieved for him and got to work, sealing off the damaged conduits with precision. It didn't take long to stop the leaking Amerigon, but when Knockout stepped back to inspect his work, his spark sank. He wouldn't be able to repair Breakdown's optic. He doubted he would even be able to find a replacement optic on this pit-forsaken ship if he tried. Not that it would even connect with the damage so severe. Knockout placed a temporary patch over the optic socket to protect it, running his service smoothly over it as he pulled away, the crushing feeling of failure seeping down to his studs. I can't fix your optic. Knockout's voice was low, almost bitter. He tried to stamp down the frustration building in his field, feeling like he was failing Breakdown in the worst way possible. His buck twisted painfully. He should be able to fix this. He should be able to do more. Breakdown was always there to protect him, and Knockout could always fix him. Now, what was Knockout good for? Breakdown's one remaining optic dimmed. An understanding of his partner's silent distress. He raised the service to place it on Knockout's own. It's okay. I would look cool with an eye patch anyway. He tried to joke, but Knockout knew he didn't truly mean it. Knockout pulled the service away. He couldn't linger on self-blame for long. There was still so much more to do. Knockout shifted his focus to Breakdown's chest. The torn plates were jagged and uneven, a gruesome sight. It looked like they were savagely sawn open, without a hint of care or precision, with a sharp intake of air. Knockout ran a handheld scanner over the exposed internals, dreading what he might find. Most of Breakdown's vitals components were still intact, luckily. They hadn't touched his spark chamber, thank the Allspark for that. Breakdown's voice cut through the quiet wiring of the scanner. I escaped before they could do more. Knockout paused, narrowing his optics slightly as he detected a strange note in Breakdown's tone. Something withheld. But now wasn't the time to press him for answers. That's good, Knockout said, more to himself than to Breakdown. We're lucky it wasn't worse. Primus knows what they were planning. He reached for another tool designed to weld thick armor plating back together and began the painstaking process of sealing Breakdown's torso. His movements were precise. He couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't doing enough. What kind of medic was he if he couldn't even repair the damage caused by a bunch of flashbacks? Then he hovered nearby, retrieving tools when Knockout asked for them, but mostly staying out of the way. The wheeling process continued. Knockout couldn't help but notice how quiet Breakdown had become. Typically, even when injured, his partner would have made some kind of sarcastic remark, maybe even complain about the pain if his receptors had been online. But now, Breakdown was distant, withdrawn. Bit by bit he welded the torn chest plate back into place, sealing the gap and restoring some semblance of structure to Breakdown's torso. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even close to the level of care Knockout wanted to provide, but it would hold until he could do something more permanent. Knockout stepped back, his servers ached, and his processor was exhausted, but Breakdown was stable. Knockout's gaze lingered on Breakdown's damaged optic. The temporary patch over it served as a constant reminder of his own limitations. He should have been able to do more. He should have been there. Knockout let out a sigh, glancing over at Danny. Thank you for helping. Then he gave a slight nod. Anytime. He paused, looking at Breakdown's still form. He will pull through. You did good, Knockout. Knockout's optics flickered, unsure if he believed that, but for now, he'd take the reassurance. The medbay felt too quiet for Breakdown's liking. A day had passed since Knockout had managed to patch him up, but the silence now only amplified his unease. Knockout was checking on Breakdown's readings constantly, barely muttering a word before wandering off to organize something, just to avoid hovering over him. Breakdown watched his partner dart back and forth across the room, feeling both grateful and exasperated. He knew Knockout was trying to distract himself, but it didn't do much to ease the tension in his field. The sound of the medbay door sliding open pulled him from his thoughts. Then he strode in, which was a regular occurrence, but Breakdown couldn't help but notice the way his field reflected that his expression didn't show. The human's gaze lifted to meet Breakdown's optics, a smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. This sight seems familiar, then he said, trying to choke. With a half-hearted smile, Breakdown let out a long, tired sigh, recalling the last time they had found themselves in the medbay together. It hadn't been so long ago, after a fight with the Autobots. Yeah, you could say that. Then he wandered closer, his gaze flickering over to Knockout, who was still trying to keep himself busy organizing. So, are your pain and sensory receptors back online? Danny asked. Breakdown tried to chuckle. Yeah, they're back online. I feel like a slag, though. He groaned as he tried to move. It will feel better soon. Knockout, who had been sorting the same medical supplies for the third time, turned to them with a sharp huff. Not soon enough, he muttered under his breath, his elbows clenched around a tool he was holding, his frustration up in his field and filling the room. He glanced down at Danny, his optics narrowing slightly. You should leave. I don't think Breakdown wants to see a human right now. Breakdown stepped in quickly. No, it's fine. Danny can stay. The kid was fine. And it wasn't his fault the others of his kind tried to hurt him. Knockout gave him a look, but he didn't argue further. Instead, he went back to organize, though the tension in his frame was impossible to ignore. Danny sighed and sat on the ground next to Breakdown, crossing his legs. He sighed deeply and looked up to Breakdown with a various smile. I get it. Humans, yeah. They are sick sometimes. A lot of the time, actually. His voice was steady, but his field wandered in bitterness and pain, especially the scientists. Then he shifted anxiously before sighing again. You know, I was experimented on too. Both Knockout and Breakdown's optics snapped to him, the silence in the room palpable, as they stared at the human, processing what he had just said. Then he laughed, trying to wave off the tension, but the sound was hollow. Yeah, it sucked. It was painful, terrifying. Really, being cut open and having your organs removed, not being treated like you're a real person. I get it. Breakdown, I really do. The room fell silent again, both mechs stunned by Danny's words. Danny, however, tried to brush it off with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He glanced at Breakdown, his tone becoming lighter, almost teasing. But hey, at least now we can be vivisection buddies, right? Breakdown blinked. The idea of Danny enduring the kind of torment Mech had put him through, it shook Breakdown. But then again, it was true that they now had something in common. Knockout, however, was less composed. His optics were wide, his field buzzing with disbelief. You were what? Danny shrugged, trying to downplay the severity of it. It was a long time ago. Not something I'd like to dwell on, but I know what it's like. His eyes flickered between the two mechs, his expression softening. I get why it's hard to trust humans after something like that. Breakdown's gaze softened as well, his field brushing gently against Danny's in a silent acknowledgement. The human was tougher than he'd ever given him credit for.